Hello everyone, I'm the Saxy Gamer, and today we're back for the third and final part of the Alexander playthrough, where today we're going to be taking a look at what happened in the late game. I'm going to give you some tips on playing Alexander in the late game, and we're going to see if I was able to win this game or if it ended in a loss. If you haven't watched parts 1 and 2 yet for the early and mid games, I encourage you to go do so. But in the previous episode on the mid game, we had taken out Coupe, well, at least took his capital, and then we took out a majority of the Ethiopian cities in a pretty long and drawn out war. So in this video, just like in the last one, we're going to start it out by declaring war again, this time on Tamar, who is the next person in line to get attacked in my domination spree here, because she happens to be nearest neighbors with Ethiopia. So of course we're going to go attack her. Attacking her was actually pretty nice, because setting it up previously from where I was in Ethiopia was very easy. I was able to even just put artillery in this encampment that was here and attack her from range. I was very easily able to get rid of her city of Kutasi, following the same principles from the last one of just getting it surrounded with some melee units, attacking it from afar with my siege equipment, and at this point in the game I was strong enough with these artillery corps that it only took me like 3 or so turns to take out this city. Now, at this point, since Tamar hadn't really been fighting for a long time, she did have some kind of strong military units. She had some tank armies and just some other tanks as well. But here's where I want to point out some very good things. So one, the fact that if you can keep your units alive and get strong promotions on them, you can end up being a lot more powerful than you should be, because fighting this war, whenever I go and attack this tank army with my tank corps, I have a huge combat advantage, in part due to the fact that I have the promotion that gives me extra combat strength against heavy cavalry. The other thing not to forget about in late game domination is that it is very beneficial to send a spy to the empire that you're attacking and run the thing that gives you an extra level of diplomatic visibility, because this is going to give you +3 combat strength in every single combat engagement that you fight in if you have a higher level of diplomatic visibility on them than they have on you. And with these bonuses, I was able to easily take out some of these tank armies that were attacking me. Even though, in theory, on paper, I should have weaker units than them, I was still able to take them out very easily. Kind of similarly to the thing about spies and the diplomatic favor, another thing that a lot of people seem to forget about is military engineers. And if I'm being honest, I forget about them all the time. But I got one here because I wanted to try out using them a little bit, specifically to build lots of railroads. Because railroads are like, I mean, they're basically just roads on steroids, where if you build them, your units will get an incredible amount of extra movement whenever they move across the railroad. So this is important for a domination game because it allows you to connect like the backline safe cities with the war front. So then as you build new units to send into the war, they can get there in 1 or 2 turns, as opposed to, you know, like 4 or 5 if they're traveling on either normal road or no road at all. So I got this military engineer, started to build some railroads, and we'll see later on just how good these railroads actually were. Combat at this point is still pretty similar to what it is in the mid-game, where you basically just put the city under siege and then you hit it a bunch of times with artillery and stuff like that. At this point in the game, the artillery with the observation balloon have a range of, I think, like 5, or it's either 4 or 5 tiles, I think, so they can hit from really far away and be under basically no danger. So as long as you have strong melee units that can sit around the city, you really should have not much trouble taking cities at this point. We then entered the Atomic Era, and I was finally out of my Dark Age and into a Normal Age. Unfortunately, Tamar was also in a Normal Age still, but I mean, I guess it's good that you didn't have a Golden Age, but this did help my loyalty in a lot of my cities, because, man, the Dark Age penalty is just brutal. The other nice thing here was that Tamar's cities had lots of population, so as I took them, it made all of the surrounding ones pretty stable, because the clump required to make city loyalty stable was a lot smaller due to the fact that the cities themselves have higher population, so they exert more loyalty pressure on their surrounding cities. I also did start to build some bombers in the capital, so the bomber is a really good unit that I think a lot of people kind of forget about. I know the AI always forgets about aerial units, but they are really strong, and they're basically like the siege equipment on steroids, though, except with a much worse promotion tree. So I mean, I think that a fully promoted siege unit is better than like bombers, but I think the bombers still do have a lot of effectiveness, because you can hit cities from so far away with them, and although they don't have quite as much hitting power as something like an army of artillery or rocket artillery, I still think that they're a very good option and something that you should be using in late game domination. Tamar's capital was very easy to take, basically just more of the same in terms of how I took it. The one other thing that I want to point out that I don't think I've called attention to thus far in this series is something that is specific to Alexander. So when you're playing Alexander and you take a city that has a wonder in it, all your units fully heal. So what this means is that if you can throw units into a city for a turn. As long as they don't die, even if they get down to like 1 HP, it's worth throwing them into that city if it guarantees that you'll take that city in a turn, because if you take the city and it has a wonder in it, then all those units are going to heal up to full anyways, so it's almost like they took no damage to begin with. So if you're attacking a city with a wonder as Alex, don't be afraid to just throw units straight into it, as long as that city has a wonder in it, so that way you'll be able to heal once you take the city. At this point in the game, I had 2 bombers online, so I was moving them up to the front lines and just kind of continuing to steamroll through Tamar. Whenever you're this late in the game, you don't need to fully eliminate civs. It's fine to just take their capital and then just take as much as you need basically to get to your next target. So that's exactly what I did. I used my bombers and more of my artillery to just steamroll through these cities of Tamar. Basically just form a nice loop from my cities that were previously belonging to Ethiopia all the way over to my cities that used to belong to Scotland. That way I could make a nice big circle there, kind of just enclose the rest of Tamar's cities and not really have to worry about loyalty too much. Right here's an example of how much extra movement you can get from the railroads. So basically the entire time I had been fighting, every single turn I would go and I would build another railroad tile just leading up to the front line. So you can see right here, this artillery that would normally have 2 movement is able to move 8 tiles in a single turn, which makes it incredibly easy to get troops up to the front lines. And in the case of this one, I was sending it up there to combine one of my corps into an army. So it makes it a lot faster to get your unit upgrades and new units on the front lines if you're building these railroads. And later on, you'll see how ridiculous it is with the giant death robot. But yeah, so long story short here was I played around with the military engineers a little bit this game, and I'm really glad that I did, because I think I'm going to use them more in the future. The railroads are really good for enabling troop movement. So the next big power spike that you get this late in the game is whenever you upgrade from artillery to rocket artillery, which is actually a gigantic increase in combat strength, especially when you go from an artillery army to a rocket artillery army. So I upgraded all of my artillery into rocket artillery and then continued to go attack. So Sweden asked if I was going to declare a war, so I just said yes. And then with that war declaration and my rocket artillery armies, I was then able to go and just absolutely melt through both Christina's units and her city walls, and also finish off my little my little loop of cities here to connect the new cities from Tamar with the cities that I had taken a long time ago. So the other thing that I was doing here, I still didn't have all of my units as armies, and whenever you're this late in the game, it's easy to get kind of lazy and just not upgrade into armies, but it still is important to upgrade your units into armies, especially if they have a lot of promotions. So you could always build new armies if you have a military academy in a city, but it's not quite the same as whenever you have, already a level 6 rocket artillery that has a ton of promotions. If you combine that into an army, it ends up being a lot stronger of a unit. So don't forget late game into domination to just keep building small units in some of your other cities that you've taken and just use them to continue to reinforce the troops that you've been using throughout the game. Tamar did offer me a peace deal, and I just took it because at this point I already had her capital. I didn't really need much else from her, but she was offering like 100 gold per turn, so I was certainly going to take that, because then that just makes it even easier to get more unit upgrades, potentially even buy some units if I need, and make sure that my economy is in a pretty good spot. I did get my tier 3 government as well. I went for fascist in this game, which is definitely the best whenever you're going for a domination game, because it gives you +5 combat strength on all units, which is really insane, and it also gives you +50% production towards all military units, which is, once again, really insane for domination victory. So I switched to this, threw in some new policy cards, and this is definitely what you want to go for a late-game domination government. And at this point in the game, as I was attacking Sweden cities, so Sweden, basically the entire game was way ahead of me in science, but whenever you get an army this big, you can see just how strong it is, because these cities that I was attacking had virtually no chance to defend themselves from these rocket artillery. Like, I would destroy the city defenses in basically one turn, and in a lot of cases, I could totally take over a city in a single turn through the use of my rocket artillery and my bombers. Plus, I had Beowulf as a hero as well, so all of these things combined made it really easy to take cities at this point. And at this point in the game, the thing that you want to do is just try to keep up a ton of momentum. Go as fast as you possibly can through other people's cities. Like, try not to give them any space to even build an army up to defend against you. The faster you can take their cities, the easier it's going to be for you. And I guess that's especially easy on Alexander, since you can, potentially heal if you take a city with a wonder. But if you just keep that train rolling, then chances are you're going to have a very easy time going through other empires and just taking them over. I did get a little upset at the pathing in Civ 6 right here because I had my level 4 tank army. I was going to attack this city, and the combat preview said I was going to take the city, which is probably true if it went through land, but for whatever reason, it embarked the unit and then tried to attack when embarked, and it did very little damage to the city, did a lot of damage to my tank, and then the next turn, the tank got killed by a machine gun, so I was pretty upset with the game for that one, but it's one of those things of, you know, Civ 6 sometimes just has a little bit of issues with unit pathing, and that was a pretty big example of that one. And then I even got double unlucky because the next turn I went to go and try to take the city again with another tank army. I attacked it this time on land, and it still didn't do enough damage to take it, even though the combat preview said it would, so don't always trust the combat preview. Sometimes it's not very correct. Fortunately, though, on the next turn, I was finally able to take this city from Sweden, which then was a nice relief knowing that I wasn't going to get, you know, screwed over by the Civ 6 combat predictor again. I did get another important technology here. I got stealth technology, so the upgrade from bombers into stealth bombers is also a pretty big thing, kind of like the upgrade from artillery into rocket artillery. The stealth bombers are such an overpowered late game unit. They have insane range and insane damage as well, so if you get a few of those, so I got this technology and then immediately upgraded all 3 of my bombers into stealth bombers, and these things just absolutely shred through cities. So that's basically what I did for the next few turns. I just abused the stealth bombers. I also did connect a gigantic railroad, so I had a railroad that started all the way from, I don't even remember what Ethiopian city it was, but started all the way over at the Ethiopian city, connected all the cities that I took from Tamar, and then connected that up to Edinburgh, up in the land that previously belonged to Scotland. So I had a nice gigantic loop to be able to send units around my empire at very fast speeds. It didn't take very long then for me to take over Sweden's capital. You can really just see how overpowered the rocket artillery and jet bombers are at this stage of the game. Like, you can attack from so far away that they have no chance of defending themselves against you, no chance of killing the units, and it's just super easy to just steamroll through everybody. So that's exactly what I was doing at this point. So I had taken all the capitals except for Gorgos and Pedros, and the difficult thing here was that I actually didn't know where they were, so I did have to kind of go around and find them. I was also doing this thing right here, so I then had 2 military engineers, so I just had them work with each other to make 2 railroad tiles per turn. If you get 2, that's honestly even a lot better than 1, because then building the railroad faster makes it even faster to get up, you know, the infrastructure to get units moving faster. So it's something I would recommend, and something I'm probably going to try in future domination games. Don't be afraid to even use 2 military engineers. You know, I mean, a lot of people don't even build 1, but don't be afraid to use 2. And then, yeah, I sent some line infantry that were just kind of sitting on the back lines out to scout. I found Pedro's land, and then as I was working my way through Sweden, I was able to find Gorgo's land as well. So I had sight on 2 of the empires that were the last 2 necessary for my domination game. And of course, I then declared war on them and started to work towards finishing off those last 2 capitals. I once again, though, got a little clumsy with a unit. So this is what, like the 3rd unit I've got a little clumsy with. I had a level 7 modern armor army that I sent straight into the land of Gorgo, which got pretty much demolished by a combination of city wall attacks, a machine gun army, a jet fighter, and another modern armor army. So it did take a lot to take it down, but I did lose that unit. So, I mean, you know, probably don't be as clumsy as me whenever you have a really good unit like that. I, of course, made peace with Sweden just to, you know, seal up that front a little bit and get a little bit of extra gold per turn. Didn't really matter too much at this point because she was putting up basically no fight because I took almost all of her cities. And even though I lost that level 7 modern armor, it didn't really hamper any of my progress towards taking over Gorgo. All cities at this point in the game basically can be taken over in 1 turn whenever you have an army like this, so that's exactly what you should aim to do. Just try your best to take literally a single city per turn, and it's very possible and honestly pretty easy to do at this point. After a few more turns of stomping through Gorgo's land, I eventually found her capital of Sparta, so of course I sent over the 3 rocket artillery armies to just, you know, basically go to work and start working away at that city. I was having some loyalty issues in some of the cities here, but it didn't really matter just because I was able to, I mean, like, I had sight on her capital at this point, so as long as I'm able to take that capital and hold it for enough turns to win, that's really all that matters. I also was just scouting out, trying to find Pedro's capital as well, and I did find that. So at this point, I saw both of the cities that I needed to take for the end of the game. And whenever you get to this point in the game, you should just beeline towards those two cities exclusively. Doesn't even really matter if you can hold them for very long. You just need to have them. You just need to have them both held at the same time. That way, you are in possession of all the capitals for one turn, and then you win the game. So Sparta fell pretty fast. I entered the information era and took the tech for a free GDR because why not? That's always, very fun to have. And let me just start to show you how ridiculous the movement is with these railroads. So this GDR can move a ridiculous amount of tiles, and then as it got onto the railroad network, like look at how far this thing can move. It can probably move, I don't know, like 36 tiles, I think is what it can move, something like that. So just goes to show the power of having railroads in your game. And of course, what a better way to end off a domination game than with using a nuclear weapon on Brazil's capital. So that is exactly what I did. Took my jet bomber, took one of my nuclear weapons, and just dropped that on their capital. Finished it off with a modern armor, and that was the end of the game. I actually managed to win my first game after first game on Deity after not having played Civ for like 3 months. So I'm surprised that I did it. It definitely wasn't the cleanest game. I probably could have had a much better mid-game especially, but we'll see how that improves as I go on further in this series. So next up in our A to Z challenge is a Manator of Nubia, so be looking forward to those videos. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like. If not, feel free to dislike. If you're looking for some more Civilization 6 content, feel free to subscribe. Thank you everyone for watching, and goodbye.
By your actions this day,